Herzlich willkommen zur letzten Keynote der Tagung. Herzlich willkommen an alle Kolleginnen, Freundinnen, Mitarbeiterinnen der deutschsprachigen Hochschuldidaktik. And I will switch to English now. Educational development, quality assurance, evidence. These are all terms that we have discussed at this DGHD conference at great length and with great passion so far. And we will do this also in the future. It's my pleasure now, as a final highlight of this, as one of the final highlights, there will be more to come of course, as one of the final highlights of this year's conference, to introduce to you Professor Ronnie Bamber from just some weeks ago, Queen Margaret University in the beautiful city of Edinburgh in Scotland. At this university, she was, on my script I still say is, but now I know that you were, she was director of the Center for Academic Practice, which included both educational development, but also a researcher development unit, which I find personally very unusual, maybe, and at the same time interesting. Before working in educational development, she was a lecturer in Spanish for 18 years. I found out, teaching in different universities across the UK. Her current research is in universities as organizations, the development of academic staff, and the evaluation of academic work. Her research interests corresponding to this are universities as organization, academic professional development, evaluation, higher education, learning and teaching in higher education, employability, and there's a very impressive record of her research that she did in the last decades. So for everybody who would be interested in this, I can really recommend finding out about Ronnie Bamber. She also works in, and has worked and still works in the consultancy, learning, teaching, assessment, and curriculum design. All these things and topics, many of the topics that we talked about here at this conference. And dear Ronnie Bamber, especially in times when it's not so common or not seen as normal to collaborate, work together between countries, even on this continent, we are very honored to welcome you here at this conference of DGHD. We are very welcome to welcome you to such an experienced professor from Scotland, from the UK, at this conference. Welcome.
Thanks very much, Robert, and thank you all of you. Up until 5 minutes ago, there was nobody in the room, and I thought you had all done the logical thing and gone home for the weekend. So thank you so much for being here. I'm really grateful. I'm also very grateful to Claudia and the programme committee for inviting me to come here to speak in this wonderful location. What a privilege. So thank you very much indeed. I'm going to talk to you, if I could put my slides up, please. Do you want me to do it from here? I'm going to talk to you about something that has really been bugging me for decades. It's been troubling me for decades. How can we use quality assurance for enhancement purposes? I feel as if I have spent half my life writing quality assurance documents, trying to prove things for quality assurance purposes. Surely we can use all of that resource, all of that effort in order to improve student learning. But I don't think that for most of my career, I've achieved that. But I will take you through it, and I will particularly refer to evidence, because again, I and others have been quite poor at using evidence. In the UK, just as here, and I was able to understand a little bit of the discussion this morning about 2020 and what that means for people, we have spent millions and millions of pounds on learning and teaching project work, both within and outside of universities. We have not always been that great at evidencing the value of those activities, and politically we have suffered as a result. So I will give you my take on how I think we can be much cleverer about using evidence. I'm sending you a postcard because I would like to take you on a little bit of a journey that I've been on and that the Scottish higher education community has been on. I'm not sending you this postcard because I think we're perfect or to say, hey, we're great, just copy us, because obviously it's not like that. But there are things that we have learned about using QA for academic development, and also about some of the behaviours that are conducive to enhancement. We've been doing this for about 15 years, and I think they might be of interest to you in your context as well. So this is a postcard to you with my messages. I wasn't going to mention the B word, but some very clever person has created a new set of stamps and put them up on the web around the B word. So hopefully you will decide that in Scotland we haven't been shooting ourselves in the foot, at least on academic development terms. So, should we and can we use quality assurance for academic development purposes? Here's where I'm coming from with this. That's me, well, see if you can spot me, the one with dark hair, 30 years ago with some of my lovely postgrad students, and it was a very different educational world for those students. There was no Bologna. Learning outcomes, what were they? No credit and qualifications framework, no assessment specifications. We made it up as we went along. No clear written information for students, no lecturer development. I went in and taught these poor people, making it up every day and knowing that I wasn't quite good enough or wasn't nearly good enough, even though I loved teaching them. And there was no knowledge. I heard constructive alignment being mentioned this morning. There was no knowledge of any of the theory behind why we teach in certain ways. So the world has moved on in universities a great deal in the last 30 years. And I want to say how glad I am in many ways that that has happened. So we have a lot to thank the quality systems for. I also have a lot not to thank them for, and I will talk a little bit about that. You see, now I'm not employed by anybody. Nobody can sack me. I can say what I like, yes. But I am still very heavily linked to the Quality Assurance Agency, and I'm an accreditor for Advance HE, which gives out professional qualifications to academics. So I'm still very linked to the academic community, even though I don't have to get up at 6 o'clock every morning and commute to work. Okay, quality culture in the UK. I will just very quickly skip through a number of things just to demonstrate this journey we've been on. So before the 90s, very little regulation. Academics did what they fancied and nobody asked anything about it. By the mid-90s, it was a very different scenario, and the quality culture was so heavy that eventually the universities kicked back and went to government and said, if you don't get these quality assurance agencies off our back, we are not going to play ball with you. So there was a big political battle in the mid-90s, and we moved gradually into a different culture. Now, I've said that in that last column that we've moved towards quality enhancement in Scotland. Scotland has its own higher education, its own education system, and I will talk specifically about that soon. Coming back to my QA experience, I was reviewed many times as a program leader when I was running Spanish programs. I was reviewed as part of institutional review as an academic developer, and I can't say that either of those were particularly pleasant experiences, anxiety-provoking at the very least, and I can see some people nodding your heads. You recognise this syndrome when you don't sleep at night because you realised what you haven't done. So those were difficult. It was also tricky being a reviewer. and I have reviewed both at the subject level and at the institutional level. I am a trained reviewer for the Quality Assurance Agency, and that's tricky too, because when people are being reviewed, it really matters to them, and you are desperately trying to be fair, but at the same time to be a proper reviewer. So that's very tricky. In terms of QE, quality enhancement, that's been very different. That's a little picture of Queen Margaret University. And as Director of the Centre for Academic Practice, I've been involved in lots of quality assurance linked to academic development. I have also run I've run 2 national projects and done lots of stuff institutionally under the enhancement themes that I will tell you about in a minute. Those have been far more pleasing experiences. Why? Well, obviously because we were doing quality, but it felt like you might help the students to learn at the same time. So that has been very positive. Just to be clear what I'm talking about when I talk about academic development, I think you do the same things, but what we do in Scotland is we work with programme teams, and our validation is your accreditation, so we go in and support them. We support university strategy. If the university decides it wants a new virtual learning environment or a new personal academic tutor system, we help. We do consultancy with teams or individuals on learning and teaching enhancement, and we do scholarship. We also run CPD programmes, PG Certs, for example, and have lots of formal staff development, for example, recognition as Fellows of Advance HE. The thing at the top is the thing that came new to us when we took a quality enhancement focus. And it's been a really helpful thing for academic development because it has given us leverage and a real place in the academic community to help them work on these themes that I will talk to you about. So those are the interstices where the QA and QA meet for academic developers. I think the problem that I've had is that I was always very clear what quality assurance was about. It was about ticking boxes. It very often ended up in game playing, jumping through hoops to prove that you were good enough. And once that box was ticked, nobody really cared until you came to the next iteration. And that felt very onerous. It still feels very onerous. QE, on the other hand, is about student learning. And it would be hard for any of us to say that that is not something that we subscribe to. However, quality assurance is very much here to stay. And in this quote, you'll read that we have it as a reality in all of our national HE systems across many countries, and it will be an important regulation and steering tool. So governments are not going to stop asking us to do QA. But it's not all negative. QA is not the wicked witch of the East, I have discovered over time. It can provide useful data that helps us to develop our practices. It can be a really powerful lever. So we can work with academics and say, do you know what? You're never going to get through accreditation with the way in which you are doing assessment, or those learning outcomes that you have written, or the way that you are teaching students in different ways. We've got a lever through QA to help and persuade academics to do things, to do the right things and to do things right. 2 aspects, to do the right things and to do things right. So QA helps us to make that happen. But it's not designed for academic development. It doesn't fit with academic cultures. And I'm sure you will recognise these adjectives or these descriptors, these characteristics of academic cultures, and we know what happens when you present people within academic disciplines with accreditation. Here's an opportunity for accreditation. Oh yeah, we're really grateful, thank you. So they're skeptical, and they don't see it as something that is rooted within their field of work or even helpful to their field of work. If you can imagine this lot, this is from Bologna, but imagine this lot are being told, here's what's going to be happening, guys. And you can see, you know, it's like any lecture room, you've got the ones at the back who are talking to each other and thinking, how on earth are we going to get out of this? This, the guy here who's looking across is thinking, oh, I'll ask her to do it. This one at the front is thinking, well, that's my research completely down the drain for the next year. Although there is always the one excited academic or the one engaged student at the front who you make eye contact with and think, thank goodness you are there. So they are not grateful. How do we work with people in a way that will encourage them to do the QA, which is not going to go away, but to make them realise that it might be helpful for their students and their work? So my postcard at the end of that section is that we can use QA for academic development, but it's challenging, it's tricky. Now in Scotland, we've been trying to tackle that challenge for some time, and just in case you're not sure where we are, we're the bit at the top of the UK. Anybody guess what the map is? It's the Brexit vote. I said I wouldn't mention it, but I can't stop myself. It's too distressing. So you can see Scotland is yellow. We're with you guys. I'll cry. So that's where Scotland is. And the journey that Scotland has been on is a bit like the one I've been on myself, going down that corridor from quality assurance and all the managerial imposition that can imply to a much more collegial quality enhancement environment. So things have become better, but we don't know it all by any means. We are still struggling month to month to make this work for us. And I'll show you some examples of that. Just so that you know the background, in 2003, we introduced the Quality Enhancement Framework. And the astonishing thing there is that there were visionaries within the Quality Assurance Agency who thought we can do quality differently, and they have stuck with it for the last 16 years. So I say there's a greater sense of ownership. That's a lie, actually. There's a greater sense of ownership by some university communities. Some people will never go near quality assurance or quality enhancement, but there's a much greater sense of ownership than there used to be. Here's what our framework looks like. There are 5 pillars to the framework, and you can see the first one is institutional review. We had our institutional review at Queen Margaret back in April, and it was still a mountain to climb. It was still onerous, but the fact that it is enhancement-led means that you engage people in a different way, and we are learning to put a different flavour on review. The truth is, the minute the reviewers come over the portal of the university, they are reviewers, but it feels different because we are talking to peers about enhancement. We are still obliged to do institution-led review, so that is, the first column is institutional accreditation, the second one is programme accreditation, I think, for you. We have a requirement to engage students at every level, to do public information, And we have something very new, these enhancement themes I mentioned. For academic development, we have great opportunities in all of these areas, but especially in the enhancement themes. And if you look at the enhancement themes website, you will find that there is loads of resources on a great number of topics. Those topics are the ones that the HE community, the 19 universities in Scotland, have decided on from year to year. What do you notice about the pattern over time? Somebody shout up. Can you see the pattern changing? Well, just so that I don't have to nobble anybody else, I'll ask Robert. Robert, how has the pattern changed? That's what happens if you sit at the front. How has the pattern changed over time? Can you see? Yes, you. You're the guy with the mic.
Yeah, the colleagues say that from teaching to learning there's a development. Thank you. Thank you very much. But also the curriculum, so maybe more the meso levels are emerging as a topic, maybe?
Yeah. Okay. So we've chosen distinct aspects of the learning and teaching experience. At first we were doing one a year or two a year. It was crazy. So we realised that we had to slow down and spend more time. So usually, under the Student Transitions Enhancement theme, the last one we did, which I chaired for Scotland, that was 3 years of 19 universities working together, very complex, wonderful work. And the first year tends to be a scoping year. The second year tends to be getting on with fixing transitions. And the third year is finishing up and reporting and evidencing what we have done. But the evidencing has been planned since the beginning of the first year. Okay? So those are the topics decided by all institutions. And what I learned very quickly is that we were moving from stuff development to staff development. You don't make people change their thinking and practices by giving them a great big guidance reference book on assessment. We've got a book on assessment that's that big. If you want to download it, it's on the web, which was one of the outputs for the first enhancement theme. Now everything that we do is far more interactive, and it's much more about how do we get people involved in a change process so that we affect their practices. That doesn't happen with the dusty tomes sitting on shelves. So we have changed topics over the years, and we have learned how to do things differently in trying to make that change happen. The levels, there is activity at the sector level. The collaborative clusters are universities working together, and then we have institutional work, and at all of those levels, academic development is happening, facilitated by different people. So great opportunities there. I've put links into lots of the slides, so if anybody's interested in following up on any of these resources, they will be there. What we have done in trying to do all this is we have tried to move from the left of this diagram to the right, the trajectory from the old classic managerial quality culture towards an enhancement culture. Quality assurance has been incorporated into quality enhancement, and in doing so, the trajectory has taken us towards some characteristics that are far more at the heart of what we want to do in academic development. So that's been our trajectory, moving across from managerialism towards greater bottom-up engagement. Obviously, that's the direction of travel. It's not going from one stage to the other. We're in different places at different points, but that is the intention. There is still a lot of quality assurance going on, The whole system is predicated on institutions committing to doing very good quality assurance, and that is going on. But there is also lots of quality enhancement related to the themes. So lots of research that would not have gone on in institutions. So for example, how are we doing on student transitions? What's the difference between how we support transitions from the undergraduate degree to master's degree in different subject areas? How do we support students who are coming in from what we call a widening participation background? How do we support international students? There are many different transitions that we have looked at, and we have researched these within each institution and also at the sector level. So research was commissioned on behalf of the sector into how those transitions were happening. There's been a lot of engagement of staff and students, resources put in, but what is magic from the academic development point of view is that we get strategic leverage, because these topics become embedded in the university strategy, and senior management take them seriously because they are related to our national quality system. So my postcard to you at the end of that section is that you can get better engagement in quality. We can actually change cultures if we try. We can work with people in a different way. So for example, last semester I was looking at how we support programme leaders in managing the wealth of evidence that we expect them to collect about their students and how we help them to use that. Those are things that have come out of the enhancement themes. The discourse has changed. Even the managers in our institutions talk about longitudinal induction and student transitions. They have got the language that has come from the themes. We have needed to develop and adopt different enhancement behaviours, and I'll tell you about what some of those are. I think on Wednesday, Monica talked about epistemic differences and epistemic practices. And there was a project in Scotland a few years back called Ways of Thinking and Practicing in the Disciplines, and they got a lot of government money to look into that topic. I think what we have been developing as academic developers in the Scottish system is ways of thinking and practicing epistemic practices in academic development to help us get some purchase on quality. So we have found different ways of thinking and practicing as academic developers. That has partly been informed by these descriptors that have been produced by the sector in terms of what are the characteristics of enhancement. And I'm going to think of those behaviours, especially in terms of the very challenging ones. It is so hard to collaborate with somebody at the next desk, never mind somebody in another department or another university. So how do we tackle these really tricky challenges? So collaborative practices, how do we make that happen? There is a real sense that we are in it together. And what I have been really surprised by is open conversations that have developed over time. When this all started, I would be at a quality assurance agency event and I would think, I'm not telling them that we don't do everything perfectly, because then they'll get us when they come to do institutional review. That was very scary. Over time, all of the institutions have learned it's okay to say we're not perfect. It's work in progress. And we say that in conversation with the Quality Assurance Agency and with peer reviewers. We can say we have no heart, we have no brain, we have no courage, we have no home. And in fact, we don't actually have consistency between how we do things in different subjects, but it's work in progress. We're working on it. So being able to say That reflective statement, we're not great at this, but we're working on it, and here's what we're doing, is fine for our quality enhancement-led approach to quality assurance. I've got a nice picture of Dorothy's red shoes, if Dr. Schneider's here. I could have put those in. Here, how do we do this? Well, this is a graphic done by students at an event at which all the universities were given the chance to do inputs. This was in December, and this was me talking about creating enhancement energy. And I'm saying things like, this swimmer who's just about to go under in the middle is saying, I'm just trying to keep my head above water. How can I think about enhancement too? That's the reality of what we are saying and what our academic colleagues are saying. So that was an honest reflection of what we at Queen Margaret were experiencing in our attempts to enhance. This very messy diagram is a diagram of all the Scottish institutions. Each blue circle is a university, and this was in the middle year of the student transitions theme. Each line is a collaboration going on, or trying to go on, between universities. It's not easy, but they were trying to go on. You can see that Stirling is in bed with everybody here. Don't know why they were so popular, but that gives you an idea of the scale of collaboration, but it is tough. We've had lots of collaborative projects. So here were 4 universities working on online induction, and if you want some online induction resources to make available to your students, they're up there on the Enhancement Themes website, along with case studies from every university in Scotland saying, here's what we're trying to do, here's the things that are working, the things that aren't. There are resources that we are sharing. So here are some introductory resources, induction resources from Edinburgh University. And here's some research that we commissioned on which transition skills and strategies might be helpful for students to develop as they navigate their way through university. And so we got someone to produce materials which then were used to produce leaflets to give students some background information which could then be used within their university setting. We also produced a transitions map. I don't expect you to be able to read this, but every island on the map is either a thematic area or a stage of the university process, and every island is populated by materials and resources and commentaries from staff and students across the Scottish sector. So if I want to know what Glasgow University is doing to support student induction of international students, I would probably find it on there. So, collaboration, in spite of these beautiful outputs, is tough. And we know that it only works well if you give people the opportunity to collaborate on something they want to collaborate on, which is why the enhancement approach is helpful. We are not saying you must collaborate on this quality assurance initiative. Each university decides what their focus is. Obviously, we have pressures, and usually the usual suspects turn up at every event, but then we are bringing in more people all the time. What we've discovered is collaborations don't work if you say, go forth and collaborate. They only work if they are supported, structured, resourced, monitored, reported. Then you will get something from them. Now, student partnership is probably the toughest demand of our enhancement-led approach. It's not that anybody wants not to collaborate with students, and we do it a lot, but it's tough. Here we have one of our conferences, and that is a student on the podium giving the keynote address. So students change quality. We know how powerful they are, and we keep working at how we engage them in doing that. Here are a number of pictures of students giving talks, talks, running workshops, taking the lead in our student network, here they are on a panel. They have been the power behind our enhancement approach. They make you do stupid things, though. So this is a group of students with whom I did a panel discussion, and they insisted we shouldn't do the normal formal photograph at the end. So there are challenges behind student partnership, and probably the biggest one is that the students change continuously. So you get some fantastic students involved and then they move on. Just like our colleague here, you're probably going to move on at some point. You'll probably become an academic developer once you stop being a student. Okay, and the expectations have kept rising. First of all, we talked about student involvement. Let's be nice to the students and we'll invite them along to listen to us. Then it was participation. Oh, well, we should give them a place on committees. And then it was equal numbers of students on committees with staff. And from there on to partnership and co-production. We're still struggling to make this work. It's tough, both for the students and for us. Our expectations are very high. The final thing is what I really want you to take away and put in your back pocket and think about, what am I going to do about this on Monday morning? It is such a big issue, how we use evidence or how we don't. And I have team members who have said to me, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to do the project or do you want me to evaluate it? Because I haven't got time for both. So we know that it is difficult. Here's a quote from a paper about accreditation in Vietnam, and I really felt for these people. The entire university was desperately looking for evidence. I was doing it myself back last April when our institutional accreditation was going on. Oh, I know that academic staff in that area and that area are doing some wonderful things with the students, but I don't have the evidence to put it in front of a review panel. How do I gather that evidence? So it's something that will not go away. It's really problematic in educational terms. We are drowning in evidence. We have demands about demonstrating the impact of what we do. It's not a meteor hitting the earth. It's student learning. How are you meant to demonstrate impact of A plus B, therefore the students learn better? It's a nonsense. But somehow we've got to get to grips with this. And for the enhancement theme that I was running, this graphic had real political clout. It helped us to persuade the politicians that the work was worth doing. Here are the numbers to demonstrate engagement. People came and they sat in rooms, they talked about this, they produced papers, they did workshops. Those are outputs, not outcomes, but that's a start to thinking about the evidence that you need to produce. And this level of evidence is very important for university leaders who need to be able to cite figures in terms of what we are achieving. But I would insist that far more important than those numbers are the stories that we need to tell about the students. Here is, that's the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland in Glasgow, students sitting on the steps, and a group of the students from the Conservatoire did a play, wrote a play and performed it at one of our enhancement events. Nobody had dry eyes because it was from the students themselves. One said, I arrived late, I was sent to the wrong building, that was so confusing. I got lost, I couldn't find any friends, I had no sense of belonging. I had to walk into that building on my own, that is so intimidating. And it was such a big place. And I'm deaf, how can I belong to this? And I live at home, so how can I possibly fit in with all of these people? Those student stories are the most powerful things that we can put in front of the people who need to be convinced that what we are doing is worthwhile, whether it's in a project, whether it's any other academic development initiative. The stories are very powerful. Here's an example which I won't play the video. We produce a lot of videos as an outcome, as an output from our enhancement work. And here are the two Ryans. This guy on the left got brought to the recording by his dad, who explained to my colleagues that Ryan was told at 16 that he would never be anything and never do anything because he has Asperger's. The other Ryan also had a disability. So these two students talk about the help that they got to help them induct into university, and that is very, very powerful, whether you're talking to people with money, like our university leaders, or people who are giving the go-ahead for projects. The two Ryans are what does it for me. So, how do you do it? What I would advocate, and this is something I have written about in publications, is a mix of data. We do it in our research. We need to do it explicitly in our academic development work. And we need to design it into our academic work right from the beginning. Plan and gather a mix of data. Triangulate different data sources. So, these two guys, on their own, nobody's going to give us any money on the basis of that story. But if you put their story together with other types of evidence, then you get a powerful mixture. So, put your data together and use it. And very often we put a lot of effort into gathering data and then we forget it because we're on to the next job or the next project and the data gathers dust. That I can see some people smiling ruefully. Let me give you an example of what we did for the Student Transitions Enhancement theme. So the national project, I thought, how are we going to get all these people on the same page? Okay, use a logic model. Is anybody familiar with logic modelling? No? It's a way of getting onto one page what is our aim for this particular initiative, and that says that our aim is to enhance the student transition experience in Scottish HE and promote associated practices within and beyond Scotland. Big ambition. These are the objectives that we set for ourselves, and here were the impact indicators that would let us know when we got there. The idea of the logic model is it encapsulates the key objectives and the activities on one page, and you read across. So if you look at the colours, there's red going across the page, there's purple going across the page. So that's a way of having a useful planning tool. But if that's what we want to achieve, those are our objectives, what evidence do we need to gather in order to demonstrate that we have achieved those things? And I've used this not only with the enhancement theme, but with my team at work at the university. And it really focuses the mind thinking, what do we need to do? What do we need to gather in order to demonstrate the value, to evidence the value of our work? What this shows here is my take on the types of evidence we might want to triangulate. We've got research, so we would want to say there have been some really interesting papers written about student transitions. Here's what we learn from those papers. There's what we learn from evaluation, and then what we often forget is practice wisdom. What do we know about teaching our subject that helps us to understand what is working well or not? What are the stories that students are telling us? What are the corridor conversations with colleagues that tell you something? What's the gut feeling that you have in your stomach when you come away from a class and you know it was rubbish? So put a mix of things together and put it into a grid, and with a bit of luck, you will then have something that will help you to evidence the value of what you are doing, remembering that that is within your judgment, in your context, and in the experience that you are familiar with. There is no one right answer to, does this work? It will work in this context with certain people in a certain way, and that is the evaluation data that we need to impress upon whoever the receivers are. So my message from this is, think carefully about how you evidence the value of your work. Those of you who have been doing all those wonderful projects for the last few years, just take home that question to yourself. How well have you been evidencing the value of those projects? And what evidence mix might you put together to persuasively demonstrate the value of your work? So, coming back to my original question, can we use quality assurance for academic development? I very firmly think yes. There are currents of energy, politically and economically and emotionally, that come with quality assurance. If we can leverage those currents, we can certainly use that for academic development. So my final postcard is that if we use certain enhancement behaviours, like collaboration, like student partnership, and like the good use of evidence, then we will be able to use QA for enhancing our students' experiences. So I hope that there will be some takeaways for you in all of that. And I would just like to thank you for listening. There are references if anybody would like to refer to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Roni Bamber, for this very rich, inspiring talk and the 3 postcards, or 4. Thank you also on behalf of the chairs of this Themenfeld, which we have here, Lukas Mitterer from Vienna University and myself. And thank you on behalf of the participants here. We have time for questions and remarks. And we have also 2 microphones, I think, I hope, at least. One over there, one over here. So please, Fragen, Anmerkungen, Kommentare. Ja.
Thank you very much. I truly enjoyed your heartful speech, and it still convinces me that it's important to stand in front of people and give your heart into such kind of situations. So thank you, thank you. It's not really a question that I have, but it's more something I started thinking of at the beginning of your talk, that when you mentioned that you realized that you needed to develop stuff instead of stuff. I thought about what might we learn about all your insights from how quality enhancement and quality assurance might be linked, how to rearrange our assessment practices in higher education. It's not a question I really have for you on that, but if you have anything you might add and relate to the situation of changing quality assessment, and with a perspective in how that might lead to foster better assessment techniques in higher education, I would love to hear them. So thank you.
When you say assessment techniques,
all kind of
do you mean how we assess students or how we are
examination
reviewed?
We always talk about how we can use the constructive alignment in better aligning our teaching objectives to the ways that we actually assess people and make them learn the best, blah, blah. Yeah. However, I sometimes think that we forget that our teachers, our academic teaching staff, aren't really equipped with using the possible assessment and examination techniques to help their students formatively, maybe to improve their learning. So yeah, well, lots of thinking in my head right now. So thank you. It's your fault.
Your head's going to get sore.
So, and if you have anything you may maybe give us as a hint to to use your knowledge to improve our assessment techniques.
But that's what you are. That's what we all are. We are the people who embody that wish and that ability to help academics to improve assessment and to help the students to help the academics to improve assessment. We have found, for example, that when the students, when we gather the evidence from the students about how they think they're assessed, it's very hard for the academics to stand up and say, no, we're not changing anything. But look at all the things that you've been talking about. You train new lecturers. You have ongoing development for your experienced lecturers. You are doing the support with individual academics and programme teams. That's what all this is about, isn't it? That we think, we know, that assessment especially can be done so much better. Staff development has to be it, hasn't it? But I think what we've learned through these themes is different ways of engaging people in staff development. Don't tell them they're being staff developed for a start. Don't tell them to come to a workshop and to learn from us about staff development. Let me give you one very practical example. Staff in psychology and sociology in my university were struggling because they were giving the students lots of written feedback on their assignments, which they are required to do, but the students weren't reading it. So, through an enhancement theme collaboration, they discovered that psychology and sociology at Strathclyde University had found a way of doing this. They put a box on the front of the assessment sheet and they asked the students to fill in advance, what feedback would I like you to give me on this assignment? So, several wins there. They have to write less. They give the students what the students think they maybe need, but the reason that that made sense to colleagues from psychology and sociology is it's because other psychologists were doing it, not some random academic developer who really doesn't have the credibility of people in their discipline. So how do we find ways of getting people working together that is not about come to this workshop and we'll teach you? Tough. Good luck. I'm retired. Yes! No, I should say I'm retired, but I will continue to do this work because I love it and it's so important and we have such wonderful academic development communities. Sorry, Robert, you've got the mic.
Perfect. Other questions, comments, remarks?
Yes, I have a question, but I'm not sure if I can really express it how I like. My question is, you have now given us a picture of how your accreditation system in Scotland has changed. I think we are more at the old side of accreditation system in Germany. If you would have the opportunity to give our politicals an advice how to change the system, what would be your advice?
That's a nice, easy question, Mariana. They have to come to understand the value of enhancement. And again, if the students are able to help with that, then that's a big part of the argument. It's difficult to go against the prevailing culture. And in the UK, in England, it's very different. In England, they are drowning in quality assurance and in measurement. I don't know if you've heard of the Teaching Excellence Framework. Nightmare. It does not measure teaching excellence, anything but. So if there's a prevailing culture, it's not going to be a quick win, is it? You have to work slowly and carefully and find champions. So I was in New Zealand in last autumn, working with the New Zealand Quality Agency, because they have someone there who sees the opportunity to do something a bit different. So if you can find champions, and your wonderful minister who's been here looks like somebody who might be open to all sorts of suggestions.
Other questions, remarks, comments?
Robert, they're all thinking, get me out of here.
Yes, I know, but I have a question actually, which I know, I agree.
Long enough.
I have one more question. You talked about using quality assurance for quality enhancement or development. I was also thinking the other way around. So how do you find these people that you just mentioned, the one person who is interested and open, and how do we try to look from the other side maybe as well?
So how do you mean, how do you find the people who are willing to push the enhancement agenda? Is that what you mean?
And also, how can we take on their point of view, maybe? I mean, it could also be the quality assurance wants to use quality enhancement for something, maybe?
That's tough though, isn't it? Because in my university and in most universities, quality assurance and quality enhancement are different departments, populated by different people with different philosophies and different ways of thinking and practicing. But it's really important that we work together. So I work a lot with the quality assurance people at my university, and we're all engaged in enhancements together. So we come from different places, but we both recognise that we've got to work towards the enhancement agenda. It's written in the policies of the Quality Assurance Agency, so that helps.
Thank you. Thank you, Ronnie Bamber.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.